What's up everyone, and welcome to another Bitcoin market update. In these videos you will learn how to use technical analysis to forecast price movements in your favorite cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others, and also see where we are looking to buy and sell these crypto assets ourselves. So let's get into it here with Bitcoin on the monthly time frame. If we're looking at this, we can see we have a pretty bearish candlestick here, but we still do have about 7 days left before this monthly candle closes. You know, on the high time frames like the monthly, where there's not a ton of price data, you need to be aware of how to read candlesticks. And that's because, you know, there's not the trends on these time frames do not change very often. So it's not very there's not a lot to go off of. So, you know, just looking at this candlestick alone right here could have given you an insight into the price action that we've seen this month, because this is what we would consider a bearish reversal candlestick. So this was pretty clear when we saw this candlestick with the increase in bear volume and in conjunction with the overbought RSI condition that we were due for a drawdown in Bitcoin's price. So now in terms of reading candlesticks for this month, what we want to see if we're a bull is we want to see a long lower wick of people buying the dip. And so that's what we're going to be looking for over the next, well, in 7 days. And if we get a short lower wick, that's going to be evidence that people are not really buying the dip very aggressively, and so we'll probably look for price to potentially continue lower, but we are looking for a higher low to be set somewhere above this $9,800 level from our previous low back in September. Looking at the weekly time frame, this week we have just an inside bar so far, meaning that the price action for this week has been contained inside of the high and low of the previous time period, which we're looking at the weekly, so this would be in the last week. This is our main support zone right here, this light blue zone. You can see that we didn't go below this zone yet, and we're currently operating inside of that zone as right now as we speak. Right now, the trend for Bitcoin does not look good. In terms of the drawdown, it's likely that we'll come up and set a lower high somewhere before either coming down and setting a higher low and then higher high, or I'll just draw it out. It'll be a lot easier. So because we've had a pretty significant drawdown here, it's unlikely that we'll go from 29,000 up to a new higher high on the first test. What's far more likely is we'll come up, we'll set a lower high somewhere below this one right here, and then we'll come down. Now when we come down, if we're the bulls, we want to see us set a higher low somewhere above this one, and then come up and form a higher high above this one to give us an indication that the bulls are in control. If we come up, we set a lower high, and then we go down for a lower low, that's not good. That's bearish continuation, and that's very good for the bears if you're a Bitcoin bear, but very bad for the bulls because the momentum will have swung through this light blue support zone, which will then turn into resistance over time. So that's what we're looking for on the weekly time frame. If we look at the daily, sorry, this is supposed to be on the hourly, which we'll talk about in a minute. If we look at the daily, this is really, actually, let's look at the 3-day. If we look at the 3-day time frame, this is a trade that I'm looking at making right here. And this is a very, very clear trade that, you know, we just talked about that weekly level, and we're talking about, you know, we're going to come up and probably set a lower high versus just go to a new higher high. So if we're thinking that we're going to set a lower high, where do we think we're going to set that? We can go to a lower term time frame and see where the resistance levels are. And this is our main resistance level, this gray zone right here. And the reason for that is because this is back here where we had our bull trend, and then you can see that as we drew the rectangle around this zone, this held as support twice before eventually we drew through this level and closed below it. Now we have these long lower wicks down here signifying that people are buying the dip, so I could see a move up into this zone where we then reject off of it. So this is the area that I would look for a lower high to be set on the weekly time frame. So we'll see what we get. If we don't get quite as high, I would imagine the other resistance zone to watch is this 12-hour level right here, which is this candlestick right here. So if we don't get all the way up to the gray, that's the main resistance level that we also need to keep an eye on, and that's at about 43,500 roughly. So that's kind of what we're dealing with on those time frames. You can see people bought the dip pretty aggressively down here, and so it's not really too surprising to see that the price action for, you know, when you see these long, what I meant to say was when you see these long lower wicks here, it's really indicative of people buying the dip, like I said, and a likely bounce to form some sort of a high. And given that our previous high is up here at about 59,700, it's likely that we will come up and set a lower high. It's just a matter of where. So if we know that's the case, we can start to go down to the lower term time frames and see where could we potentially make an entry. Right now, the last 4-hour candlestick looked pretty bearish here, but this candlestick is kind of recovering. If we see this candlestick on the 4-hour time frame close below this gray zone right here, this is going to be a resistance zone for price, and this is a potential short entry that is consistent with the higher time frame bear trend that we're currently in. And the reason for that is because this is where we had our bull pattern once again, with a low, high, higher low, and then higher high with 2 candle closes above the key high here. But then when we went into this level, we pushed right through this level without bouncing off of it. So if this candle closes back above this low as well as this gray zone, like back inside of it, we're in good position there, and we could see this inverse head and shoulders pattern play out, which is right here. So this is something we talked about in the past few videos. The target for this, if this ends up playing out, which, you know, this candlestick could be the very beginning of that, would be roughly, let's go, what is happening? From here up to about here. So it's about 77.55 from the head to the neckline. So let's go from the neckline up 77.55. That takes us to just about that gray level. Not quite there, but I imagine if we get up all the way to there, we'll probably touch the gray level. So that's currently what we're seeing right now on Bitcoin. This pattern, you know, comes, typically you see this at the bottom of a run, so it's actually showing up very nicely at the bottom of this run. And so if we do end up seeing a breakout above here, I would imagine that this pattern has a pretty good chance of playing out over the coming days. The other reason is because a lot of people were going short down here. A lot of people are very bearish. The sentiment in the market was very bearish. And so there's a lot of stop losses, you know, above here where people are going short down here because they're thinking, oh, this is going, you know, this is just going to continue to keep going lower, and so on and so forth. And so when there's a lot of stop losses, what can happen is what's called a short squeeze. I talked about this in a couple of videos ago, but a short squeeze is when the bears in the market are getting squeezed out of their position by the bulls who are pushing the price up. So when the bulls push the price up, if you're in a short position, you're losing money as the price goes up. And so you're kind of squeezed out of your position as the price continues to rise. You're kind of continuously forced into the situation of, oh, well, I should probably exit my position because if I don't, I'm going to continue to lose money. And so you end up getting squeezed out of that position. And when you're in a short and you exit your position, you have to buy back the asset, right? Because when you're shorting, you're borrowing the asset and then selling it. And that's how you go short. So for you to close your short, you have to buy the asset. And that's why it's called a short squeeze, because then when a bunch of shorts close their position, that's a bunch of people that are buying the asset. And so that pushes the price up very quickly. And so that's why that 4-hour inverse head and shoulders pattern could end up leading to us pushing up to this gray zone, is because of the fact that the shorts have their stop losses, most likely above some of these resistance zones, like maybe this key high, maybe this key high up here. So that's going to be something to watch if we go above this key high. I would imagine there's going to be a pretty significant push up. So we'll see what ends up happening, but that's currently what we're looking at on Bitcoin, as this inverse head and shoulders potentially playing out on the 4-hour time frame. First things first, though, we need in the next 2.5 hours this candlestick right here to close back inside of this gray zone. Otherwise, this zone is going to turn into resistance, and we'll look for a potential rejection off this in the short term before potentially, going up higher to have that short squeeze. So that's what we're seeing right now on Bitcoin. I hope you like this video. If you like this, give it a like down below and subscribe for future educational content around cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. And if you haven't already, check out our beginner technical analysis course that we just released on Leutheria.com. This is where you can learn all of the fundamental elements of technical analysis and really build that foundation that you need to get started generating consistent profit trading cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and others. And we're currently running a 20% off special through the end of the month. So go check that out. And until tomorrow, onward and upward.